going to talk about the square knot now. The square knot falls under a hitch, and that is it's tying a rope around something else, around another object, but it specifically is a binding knot. That's what type of hitch it is. It's a binding hitch. I'm going to use two different colored ropes in this case, just so you can see what each rope is doing. But we should never use this knot to actually tie two ropes together. That would be called a bend, right? So whenever you tie two ropes together, that's a bend. The square knot is never a sufficient knot for a bend, for tying two ropes together. It has a tendency to slip, and so it's not a safe knot for that use. It should only be used for a binding. So in this case, let's say that you had a set of books, a stack of books, and you wanted to wrap this rope around it, then you would tie a square knot on top of it, okay? And so I'm just going to show you with two different colored ropes so you can get a picture of what's actually going on with this knot. The square knot starts with the simple overhand knot. So right over left, and then tuck it under, okay? And then the next step is doing left over right. It's doing exactly the opposite. You're actually taking the same colored rope and doing the overhand action with it. But in this case, it's now in your left hand. And so now we do left over right and tuck it in. Then you grab the working end or the tag end along with the standing parts, and you pull in opposite directions. It makes this nice little square here, and this is called the square knot. This is also called a reef knot, as it was used for tying up sails on the old sailing ships of the late 1700s. We refer to it as both a reef knot and a square knot today, but it makes this nice little symmetrical shape, a squared shaped knot, and that's what it's known as. When you pull on it, these two sides will cinch down on one another. Depending on what type of rope you have, this knot though is susceptible to slipping. And so again, this knot should never be used as a bend. It should never be used to tie one rope to another rope and use them in conjunction with one another. It's only used as a binding knot. And I'm going to give you an example of a binding right now. Say that we're going to take a couple of books. Got these books here, and I want to tie them together. Okay? I'll set them on top of my rope. And now I'll put a square knot over these books. Many of you are definitely familiar with this knot because this is the basis for how most of us tie our shoelaces, the square knot is. In this case, we'll use it to tie these two books together. So right over left, then tuck it under. We're going to pull that tight. Now we do left over right and tuck that under. Okay, pull that tight. We pull both sides tight. We've got this nice, neat square knot on top, and it's a perfect knot for binding objects together in this case. Binding objects together. It is a binding knot. We'll do this one more time. For the square knot, used to bind objects. You could bind logs if you had them, or boards together, or in this case, books. They're used for parcels in as well. So here we go. Let me start this off correctly. We'll do right over left, tuck it under, left, after we tighten this down, left over right, and then we will pull tight. There you go, got a nice, neat square knot.